All right, welcome. In this explainer, we are going to dive deep into one of the biggest questions in sociology. We'll be covering all the key concepts and theories you absolutely need to know for your AS-level exams on socialization, identity, and social control.
Okay, let's jump right into the deep end with this massive foundational debate. What makes us who we are? Is it our biology, our nature, the idea that our behavior is basically programmed into us by our genes? Or is it our environment, our nurture, everything we learn from the society around us? This question really is at the absolute heart of sociology.
Now, to investigate this, sociologists look at some truly extreme cases, like feral children. These are individuals who, tragically, have grown up with little or no human contact. Cases like Danny, or another really well-documented case of a girl called Jeannie, give us a unique, if heartbreaking, kind of natural experiment on just how important nurture really is.
So what do these tragic cases actually show us? Well, the key takeaway is that nurture seems to be absolutely vital. Without that human contact, fundamental human behaviors we take for granted, like speaking a language or even just walking upright, they just don't develop. Think about it. If our behavior was purely instinct, they'd develop normally regardless of their environment, but they don't. And what's really crucial here is that they can't just catch up later on. This suggests there's a critical window in childhood where this social learning has to happen.
Okay, here's our roadmap for the rest of this explainer. We've just kicked off the nature versus nurture debate. Next, we're going to unpack the idea of culture. Then we'll see how the social self is built piece by piece. After that, we'll look at the key agencies of socialization, and we'll wrap it all up by looking at social control. It's all designed to walk you through the syllabus in a really logical way.
All right, let's move on to the absolute foundations. You see, before we can really understand how we're socialized, we first need to get a proper handle on what it is we're being socialized into. And that, my friends, brings us to the massive concept of culture.
So first things first, let's get these two key terms straight: society and culture. A society is the group of people themselves. Benedict Anderson had this great term for it, an imagined community, because we can feel like part of a nation even though we'll never meet most of its members. Culture, on the other hand, is the shared way of life of that group, and it has two sides. You've got material culture, the physical stuff, like our phones, our clothes, our buildings. Then you have non-material culture, the ideas, the beliefs, the values. The phone itself is material, but what it symbolizes, connection, status, information, that's all non-material.
And this slide here breaks down the 4 key building blocks of any culture. Think about it. We all have roles we play: student, daughter, friend, employee. These roles come with expectations. Guiding those roles are values, these big, broad ideas about what a society thinks is good or worthwhile, like respecting your elders. But how do you actually show respect? That's where norms come in. They are these specific, often unwritten rules for situations, like giving up your seat on the bus. And holding all of that up are beliefs, the really deep-rooted ideas we hold to be true. Altogether, they create a predictable social world.
Okay, so we've looked at the big external world of culture. Now let's zoom right in and look at our internal world, the development of the self. How on earth do we get this sense of who we are? A key thinker here is George Herbert Mead, a symbolic interactionist. He argued that our self isn't something we're born with, it's learned through social interaction. He split it into 2 parts. You've got the I, which is your raw, impulsive, unsocialized self. It's that immediate, spontaneous reaction. But then you've got the me. The me is the social self. It's that voice in your head that's aware of how other people see you and expect you to behave. So the me is constantly in conversation with the I, shaping and censoring it based on the social situation.
This idea of performing for others was taken to a whole new level by another sociologist, Erving Goffman. And this famous line from Shakespeare perfectly captures the essence of his theory.
Goffman's big idea is known as dramaturgy, and it's a brilliant way to analyze everyday life. He said we're all like actors on a stage. We have a front stage, like a classroom, where we perform our roles for an audience. But we also have a backstage, your bedroom maybe, where we can drop the performance and just be ourselves. And this constant process of controlling how others see us, he called that impression management. It's when you deliberately bring your textbook to class just to make sure the teacher sees you as a good student. We all do it. And way back, about 50 years before Goffman, Charles Cooley had this really neat, related idea he called the looking-glass self. He said that our sense of self is basically a reflection. We imagine how we must appear to other people, we imagine how they're judging that appearance, and then we develop our self-concept, like feeling proud or ashamed based on that.
It's like we are constantly looking at ourselves in the mirror of other people's reactions.
So if the self is learned and we're all just actors on a stage, who are the directors? Who are the teachers? Well, let's break down the key groups and institutions that do this teaching, what sociologists call the agencies of socialization.
Now, this is a crucial distinction you need to get right. We split socialization into two types. Primary socialization happens first, usually within the family. It's built on these really close, personal, emotional bonds. It's where we learn the basics of being human. Everything else is secondary socialization. This happens later through school, work, the media, and the relationships are way more formal and impersonal. The functionalist Talcott Parsons argued this is super important because it frees us from our emotional dependence on family and gets us ready for the wider world.
So agency number one, the big one, is the family. This is the main stage for primary socialization. It's where we learn our first roles and our core moral values from what Mead called our significant others, our parents or caregivers. We learn basic norms about everything, from how to use a fork to how to talk to people. And this is all enforced through informal sanctions, positive ones like a smile or praise, and negative ones like being told off.
As we get older, though, other groups start to have a massive influence on us. Our friends, our peers, they become a really powerful force for both socialization and, let's be honest, social control.
Peer groups teach us all the unwritten rules for our age group: how to dress, what music is cool, how to talk. They act as what we call a reference group. We literally refer to them to figure out how we should act. And the social control they have is immense, all through peer pressure and informal sanctions. Being accepted and included is a massive positive sanction. But rejection, gossip, being laughed at, those are incredibly powerful negative sanctions that push us to conform. All right, next up, education. Now, the school system socializes us in two really distinct ways. First, you have the formal curriculum. That's the stuff you are officially taught: sociology, maths, history, and so on. But just as important, maybe even more so, is the hidden curriculum. This is all the stuff you learn just by being at school. The importance of being on time, how to deal with strangers, obeying rules from people in authority, and accepting that society has a hierarchy.
Now, as always in sociology, there's a huge debate about what the purpose of all this really is. This is a classic showdown between functionalism and Marxism. Functionalists like Parsons see school as a good thing, a bridge to the wider world that teaches us all shared values. But then you have Marxists like Bowles and Gintis, who have a much more critical view. Their correspondence theory argues that the hidden curriculum is really just designed to create a docile, obedient workforce that won't question the inequalities of capitalism.
Okay, what about the media? This one's a bit of an odd one because it's so impersonal, but its influence is massive. Potter suggests this works through habituation. We're just slowly shaped by our long-term exposure. In the short term, you can get imitation or desensitization. But long-term, the media promotes consumerism, it can create fear, and it definitely sets the agenda for what we all talk about. It also performs what Durkheim called a boundary-marking function. By reporting on crime and deviance, it publicly reinforces the line between acceptable and unacceptable behavior.
And finally, religion. Even in societies that are becoming more secular, religion is still a really powerful agent of socialization. It shapes our deepest moral values. Many of our laws are based on religious principles, for example. It provides a whole design for living, with norms about everything from what you can eat to how you should dress. And its sanctions are incredibly powerful because they can extend beyond this life, with the promise of heaven as a positive sanction, or the threat of hell or excommunication as a negative one. Okay, let's pull all these threads together. We've seen how socialization works through all these different agencies. Now we need to understand its ultimate function and, crucially, look at the counter-arguments to bring our whole debate full circle. So when you strip it all back, you can see that socialization is, essentially, a massive mechanism of social control. By teaching us all the norms and values of our culture, it makes social life orderly and predictable. It gets us to conform through this lifelong system of rewards and punishments, positive and negative sanctions, so that eventually, we don't just follow the rules, we internalize them. They become part of who we are. But we have to acknowledge the other side of the coin, the nature argument, which comes from fields like sociobiology. Thinkers like E.O. Wilson argue that our behavior is heavily influenced by what he called biogrammars, a kind of biological pre-programming. From this perspective, something like gender roles isn't just a cultural invention, it's rooted in our evolutionary past. And this brings us right back to where we started. So the final question I'll leave you to think about is this. Having seen all the evidence for the power of socialization, how much of who you are do you think is a product of your social world versus your genetic code?